Psychoanalysis, personality disorders. What is your deprivation? Namaste. Deprivation and excess are believed to be core causes of fixation. And as in every disorder, we confront deprivation in personality disorders. Conversation today goes deeper into deprivation as seen in personality disorders. Guide in discussion is psychoanalysis consultant Dr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So, why early life deprivation and excess so important in psychoanalysis?
One of the defining features of psychoanalysis is significance of early childhood. Psychoanalysis believes, and I feel rightly so, that all deep pathologies originate in early childhood. Barring a few, but most of them do originate in early childhood. And therefore, early childhood becomes a very important station for psychological inquiry. Many things happen in early childhood. One of the things which can happen is the phenomena of excess or the phenomena of deprivation. Psychoanalysis tells us that excess and deprivation both are the precipitators of fixation. And fixation, as we know, is almost at the center of most pathology. That essentially we say that something is repeating itself. That you are fixated in some idea or some affect or some template. And despite the adult part of you, the rational part of you, knowing everything that is correct and sane and normal, you are still captured by that early life fixation into something which keeps repeating itself. So fixation, regression and repetition and irrationality, these four are like core issues in most pathology. At least the chronic and the acute ones. I mean, let me say the chronic and the critical ones. Therefore, deprivation and excess both are very important. Now, the system, it seems, the human system is made for some optimum experience. If it continues to have optimum experience, it will keep moving along the developmental path and keep progressing on the journey of life in a healthy way. If it encounters excess or deprivation, it is not able to move in a healthy way along the journey of life. And there comes a station of pathology. Why that is so, we don't know. But what we know for sure is that just as biologically we are hardwired, designed for homeostasis, in a psychological sense also, we are hardwired, designed for an optimum experience, a kind of a psychological homeostasis. And too little or too much compared to that optimum zone can result in trouble. And this is where the excess and deprivation comes. Now, this also are relative terms. That what is excess and what is deprivation, there is no objective quantum of it. The needs of each individual are different. So excess for one may just be normal for another. Normal for one may just be deprivation for another. So it is a very system-dependent phenomenon. And we are looking at extremely dynamic variables, extremely subjective variables. And both of them, therefore, are so important that we see in our practice, excess can lead to a sense of narcissism, entitlement, addiction. And if at some point in time the excess is taken away, it can lead to sadness, depression, antisocial behavior, addiction, or anxiety disorders, or depression. And we see that Once what was available by default, the excess is suddenly no longer there, and the man is not able to cope up. Deprivation actually is more common than excess. For every 3 cases we see of excess, we will see at least 15 cases of deprivation. And deprivation will, it also is a phenomena of socioeconomic conditions.
Definitely.
So it is not only a individual family dynamic, the larger social dynamic also is at play in both the excess and deprivation. The historical times that we refer to and what are the child upbringing practices, they also become important. And the objective conditions of political and social nature, they also become important. The scientific development and the medical state of the society is also important. So all of this come together in excess and deprivation. An important point is of modernity, that in the time we live in the last 250 years, this construct of modernity, which has been the guiding construct to our minds across the world, modernity exacerbates both excess and deprivation. And therefore, there is also a social angle, a historical angle to the burgeoning pathology in terms of numbers and in terms of the pervasiveness of it, in both the excess and the deprivation part of it.
In fact, while you're narrating the two polarities of the parenting dynamic, that is deprivation and excess, there's another term which I'm getting in touch with, and I have seen in many clients, sir, that it is to do with the compensation. While one parent is making up for the other parent, while there is an excess because of the deprivation somewhere in the environment, and vice versa. So that compensatory parenting is also one big time parameter which creates ambivalence in the psyche.
Very true. This is very common in working couples, that in order to compensate for emotional deprivation and financial deprivation, they go into excess of material abundance. And the child actually gets spoiled both ways. So this also has to do with what I said, modernity. Now, one last before we take a pause and rolling out the canvas. Both excess and deprivation do these things. One, they lead to certain psychic orientations. Two, they lead to certain templates. And three, they lead to certain behaviors. So both excess as well as deprivation, they leave behind all the three. They leave behind certain psychological constellations. They leave behind certain cognitive templates. And they leave behind repressed feelings. And they also leave behind behavioral guidelines, so to say, for future adult behavior.
True.
They also diffuse wherever they can across the psyche, informing so many different things in so many different ways that's difficult to count and make a list of. And therefore, both the deprivation and excess are very important to understand from a pathology standpoint, and even more when we talk about personality disorders. We'll in a moment, but of all pathology, if we are going to focus today on personality disorder, there's also an area where both of them play a very critical role.
So as you mentioned, personality disorders, specific to personality disorders, how do we encounter excess?
So let's start with excess and then we'll go to deprivation. We see the outcomes of excess in pathologies like narcissistic pathology, not all, but many of them, especially in cases of fragile narcissism. We see that in case of paranoid pathology, where the early life incident, the traumatic incident created the paranoid core, and then the parents fortified that by overprotection and putting in all sorts of things into the mind of the person to never trust anybody, to always see the world as a dangerous place, and always to be on guard. The world outside is a very difficult place, and you have to constantly be on guard. And this is put by parents in the mind of the child, almost removing half of his courage. So they think they are doing it for protection, but actually it ends up strengthening the paranoid component. Then we see it in the dependent personality, that the core of dependence is fortified further by parents who don't allow the child to be independent and keep providing him everything and keep overprotecting him and ensure that the dependence is magnified. Then we see it in cases of regression to primary narcissism. Now this is a psychological excess, a natural excess. That if you have
constitutional excess.
Yeah. So if you have experienced that abundance and plenitude of primary narcissism, that excess is difficult to forget. And this is one of the most difficult patients to hold in therapy, because we are asking him to embrace reality and the happiness of reality, whereas he is experiencing 10 times better happiness of primary narcissism. We are asking him to give up a sweet shop for 1 kg of sweet. And how is he going to do it? It's a loss-making proposition.
It's a bliss of narcissistic breast.
Correct? He is perpetually experiencing the bliss at the breast. So, and also we see in psychosis, too much excess. In some cases of psychosis, we see that when the excess ended, there was no resilience to accept reality, and therefore one ended up creating a world of his own, where the excess could be continued. So these are some of the instances of excess that we see in pathology, where the fixation on that excess, a constant desire to perpetuate it, and if not possible, then the rupture of pathology. And so these are some of the excess incidents that we see.
This seems to be more of the ego trying to create surreal bliss for oneself. So coming to our focus today of deprivation, how is it seen in personality disorders? Is it just the opposite of it, or some other phenomena also do participate?
Many other phenomena also participate. And deprivation is seen in a range of pathology, focusing especially today on personality disorders. The first thing that we see is what Kohut had mentioned, the mirroring deprivation. And that, I think, is one of the undervalued contributions in psychoanalysis. That when we go deep enough in personality disorders in therapy, inevitably we come across some or the other mirroring deprivation. And as we know, we have talked about it before, the 5 A's of mirroring: acknowledgement, attention, acceptance, affection, admiration. Somewhere, something has gone wrong. So there is a deprivation of some A in mirroring. So first is the mirroring deprivation. The second deprivation is by object loss in early childhood. That because of some event of real or perceived object loss, mostly it will be perceived object loss, because the real object loss will be only in case of orphans. or somebody who has lost one parent at least.
Or somebody who has been raised by the grandparents.
Grandparents. In those cases, it will be a real loss, but in most cases, it will be a perceived loss. I would say 90% of the cases that we come across, we see perceived loss.
Also, that of those emotionally absent parents.
Yeah. So there are two categories of it. One is perceived loss in the absence of the parent,
Physical absence.
physical absence. And second is the loss in the presence of a cold parent, what is called the refrigerator mother.
Yes.
Cold, difficult to please. And the man, when he grows up with such early life experience, all his life he keeps trying to warm up the cold mother. It was the experience of Winnicott also. He wrote about his depressed mother. He was taking care of his depressed mother for a long time, and Winnicott wrote very famous line. He said, "To keep her alive became my living." And alive not only means survival, but also alive in the sense of being warm and happy.
Yes.
So
many children do that, empathetic.
So early life deprivation because of object loss. It can be three categories. The real one, second, perceived in absence, temporary absence, and third, perceived in cold presence. All the three will lead to early life deprivation, and this deprivation of object loss actually is a package of deprivation. It is deprivation of trust, safety, adequacy, I am not good enough builds up, guilt, loss, powerlessness, helplessness. Along with it, it represses a lot of anger, rage, does not allow the split to close, and keeps the split phenomena always open, and creates a kind of a fragile self, does not have much cohesion, and is very easy to disintegrate with the slightest of attack. A slightest of challenge can disintegrate that fragile self. So this is a very important deprivation, and it can often lead to a very interesting thing of I want people and I don't want people. I want closeness and I don't want closeness. And this creates a perpetual problem of safety. And then different defenses are used to manage this situation. And based upon the type of defenses that you use, certain disorders come up, which we have discussed before in the Valley Junction model.
Yes.
So this also creates a very interesting dynamic. It creates a dynamic of a conflict between constitution and environmental learning. The constitution says, I want people, and environmental learning says, never again, never get close to people. So the experience says, never again. Once you got
the desire says.
Yeah. So desire says, get close, and experience says, never again. And there is a conflict between constitutional demand and experiential learning. And it creates a kind of an emotional traffic jam. And that's a very interesting thing. And this you come across most personality disorders. So it creates a situation like we are talking about this before. Two opposing opinions of Sartre and Kohut. Sartre used to say the other is the hell. And Kohut used to say the other is the sunshine. And we of course see examples of others both ways. And there is a conflict inside, that inside of you, Sartre and Kohut are fighting with each other. That I want people, I don't want people. I want closeness, I don't want closeness. Now, these are some of the deprivations that we see in personality disorders. Now, some more which I would like to mention. before we go into each of the personality disorders to find out the co-deprivation. There are certain deprivations which are common to all personality disorders. For example, problem of safety, problem of the split open, problem of I want people, I don't want people, problem of fragility. If not today, tomorrow, at some point we encounter fragility. And there would be some personality disorder without fragility, of course, but most of them will have fragility. And issues of trust, issues of closeness, issues of safety, issues of I am not good enough. Issues of wanting to depend. There will be some which will be common to all personality disorders, and then we come to some where two more elements I forgot common to our personality disorders. One is deeply repressed feelings, fear of abandonment, and kind of a let me put it this way, a constellation of mixture of traits of various personality disorders. That most of the personality disorders are of the mixed type, and we always have a mixture of traits, so that is common to most of the personality disorders.
Like there are a lot of overlapping reasons for these to coexist.
Correct. Correct. So these are some of the deprivations which are common to all personality disorders. The deprivation related to trust, love, safety, assurance to bridge the split, deprivation related to self-confidence, deprivation related to mirroring. These are all very common personality disorder deprivations. Now, let me come to one of each of the personality disorders. So each of the personality disorders will have the common ones that will be listed out and many other ones, but I will pick up the core ones. Not all of them, but the core deprivations in each disorder. And what I will do here is, I will add to the DSM-5 list of personality disorders some more personality disorders which are not there in DSM, but I have added them from a point of view that either they were there in prior DSMs, either DSM-4, DSM-3 or something of that type, or which I believe should be there.
Some suggested categories.
Suggested categories. So this is not a DSM list, but a list nevertheless.
List. Yes.
So let us start with the first one. In narcissism, the co-deprivation is of power. In dependent, the core deprivation is of adequacy, feeling of adequacy, self-adequacy.
Fair enough.
Histrionic, the core deprivation is of assurance of being interesting enough.
Visibility.
The worthy of interest.
Worth of interest.
In paranoid, the core deprivation is about safe environment. In schizoid, it is about safe closeness. In bipolar, it is about stability. In borderline, it is about cohesiveness. In sadomasochistic, it is about the freedom to release aggression. In antisocial, it is about just rewards. They have never got ethical rewards. In avoidant, It is about positive togetherness, positive company, positive companion.
Missing of positive companionship.
That's a deprivation. They never had that.
Mm-hmm.
In negativistic, it is about positive environment. In obsessive compulsive, it is about peace. In schizotype, it is about hope. In depressive, it is about sustainable happiness. And in anxious, it is about uh, positive assurance. So these are some of the core deprivations which we see in each of the.
So your screen got froze. I think you were frozen for quite a couple of seconds. So you were discussing about an anxious personality.
So in anxious, it is about it's about assured surroundings. It's about assured future.
Safety in a kind?
Safety, but in a positive sense. Because we are opposite of
the required safety.
It's
required.
We are looking at opposite of apprehension.
Yes. Quite spot on, sir. Whatever you mentioned, there was so much significantly picked up deprivations in each, which can be clinically also proven.
So these are the core deprivations. And then we always have those generic list of deprivations which are there in all the personality disorders. And there will be a list where some specific are found in each of the personality disorders, in addition to the generic and the core. So if you want to have a look at deprivations which are found in each personality disorder, there will be a core ones which are common to everyone. General ones which are common to everyone. The core which I have just discussed, and then others which are specific to that disorder. So we will have a list of deprivations in all the personality disorders. And obviously we see in most cases the mixed presentation. And one thing is often when the opposites come in the form of the mixed, like dependent and narcissism come, then one important idea to ponder would be this: can the stronger of the two be used to overcome the weaker of the two?
Okay.
Like somebody comes with a presentation of dependence in the front and narcissism in the back. Now, can this narcissism, once you identified it, can it be used to overcome the dependence? Because there are two ways of it. The dependent is in the valley, the narcissist is on the
peaks.
Yeah, hilltop, the peak of the hill. Now, the sustainable cure would be to fill up the valley and come down from the peak and live on the ground. That would be the ideal, the pure total cure. But if it is not easily doable, then is it possible to live more on the top and less in the bottom? And by living on the top, is it possible to slowly fill up the valley? So that's also an interesting thing to look at, because since most of the presentations are mixed, can we pull the stronger of the two to pull up the weaker of the two? So this is also an important idea.
So when we look from the therapeutic point of view, as a therapist, how can these deprivations be healed? Just for an example, the fix you talked about, where you see there are the peaks and there are the valleys. So ideally, how one should navigate?
A cure happens both by life experiences and by therapy. In life experiences, if you meet people who are good enough, who are safe enough, who are nourishing enough, who are mentoring enough, maybe part of it heals. We have Beyond's example, Wilfred Beyond. He did a lot of introspection, underwent therapy with two different therapists, and both of them very good therapists. Married the first wife, married the second wife, and it was only when he married the second wife that certain parts of his personality could be healed. Because there was something in the second wife that therapy happened in the wider sense of the term. And this is very important. And we have one discussion recorded on this point. Only you can heal me. That in many cases, the person is awaiting a type of person, and only if that type of person is encountered and lived with can the real healing at the bottom happen. So life experience is very important. And the second part is of therapy. And often both of them go together. But in therapy, the first thing to do is to be conscious of deprivation. That what is your deprivation? It's a very important part of therapy. What is your desire and what is your deprivation? And is the desire being guided only by deprivation? Lacan would say yes, because for him everything is lack. Deprivation is primal and eternal. But if we don't go that far, then the first thing is to be conscious of deprivation. That what have been the deprivations in life so long? And what are the feelings associated to that deprivation? And what templates have been generated out of that? What defenses are at work out of that? So this is very important. Then we come to the cost-benefit analysis of that deprivation and of satisfying that deprivation. In many cases, the cost of satisfying the deprivation would be so high that the person may choose to continue with the deprivation. And in many cases, he would say, okay, I will go to satisfy the deprivation and get rid of it. So the cost-benefit analysis is very important. And then a very important point in therapy is, what is the relation of the symptom to deprivation? He has the deprivation that the person is mentioning got related to the symptom with which he has come, or is it something different operating in the mind in a different area of operations?
Whether it's symptomatic or it's symbolic.
Correct. So is it one of the many factors in life, or is it something related to the symptoms? And most of the times we see it's related to the symptom. And then comes the question of what is the intensity of the deprivation? How deep is the valley? How hollow is that emptiness? And some of that can be fulfilled in therapy. For example, deprivation of safety, deprivation of being heard, of being held, of being contained. Many of the deprivations can be healed in therapy. And some of the deprivations may not be healed. And then there is a conscious search, an existential search of reality acceptance, of accepting what even after therapy remains as deprivation, or one chooses to allow it to continue. And then one has to look at the glass as it is, half filled, half empty, and continue with a spiritual or existential journey of his life. By then, it has become a syntheon. So it's a part of life rather than just a difficulty of life that you have to get rid of. So in some, therapy can heal completely. In some,